Hey, I'm JayTheDevGuy, and I love 2D characters in 3D worlds. Something about the confidence to have one art style for the characters and a completely different art style for the environments, and just sort of shoving them in a room together and making it work. Like, it reminds me of old hand-drawn cartoons where, you can always tell what's going to move based on what's drawn on the animation cell instead of painted in the background. It just has this janky charm, and I can't help but love it when I see it. But what really surprises me about this style isn't just the fact that the jank is charming, but that despite the obvious jank, some of the most iconic games ever made look like this. Like, it's not some niche, some of the most classics are styled this way. And it's got such range, I mean, anywhere from the cartoony storybook aesthetic of the original Paper Mario to the gory, youth-corrupting violence of the original Doom. We all just, take these games seriously. And for something as janky as having a little 2D guy in a 3D space, I don't know, I just find that kind of beautiful. So when I decided to take learning game development seriously, I mean, this style seemed like the perfect fit for me because I could take the 2D character skills I already had, which is great because rigging and animating 3D characters is kind of a nightmare. But I could put them in the 3D worlds that I really wanted to make and play. But as soon as I started really prototyping, it seemed like all of the games that do 2D characters in 3D worlds do one of a few compromises that I really wanted to avoid. Some will create a ton of turnaround sprites, so no matter which angle the camera is looking at them, they'll always have a set of sprites that's drawn in the proper perspective. So, I mean, this means you can't have just a run animation, but you have to have a run animation for when they're facing the camera directly, a run animation for when they're facing 3/4 of the camera, a run animation for when they're facing the side of the camera, a run animation for when they're 3/4 away, a run animation for when they're completely away. It's a ton of work. I mean, props to the people who do it, but this is way too much work for me to consider reasonable, so I definitely didn't want to do that. But the games that avoid doing all those turnaround sprites typically avoid it by just locking the camera completely, so all those tough angles that would break the illusion of the flat characters in this 3D world just aren't accessible at all. And a fixed camera is fine for some games, obviously, but a lot of the types of games that I really wanted to make and play, like a shooter or a Souls-like, just can't really be done with a fixed camera like that. And then, I mean, some games just say, they're made of paper, but I didn't want to do any of these things. I wanted to have 2D characters in a 3D world with no turnaround sprites and an unrestricted camera, and no paper. Which is maybe an ambitious goal, but I mean, this ambition is worth nothing if I can't get it working with something simple, like a basic 3D platformer. So my mission right now is clear. Can I make a basic 3D platformer with 2D characters in 3D world, no turnaround sprites, unrestricted camera, and no paper? So let me walk you through what that was like. So here we have a really basic scene of mine, 2D character, 3D world, no turnaround sprites, unrestricted camera, and it sort of seems like as soon as I do the most basic action imaginable, moving the camera at all, the whole thing sort of seems to fall apart. I mean, the character just creepily slides along the ground to keep the camera on its good side. But while this was janky if I stopped to think about it, this sort of just felt like that charming jank that drew me to this style to begin with, so I was kind of fine with this. I mean, as long as I have the characters rotate at the bottom of their feet instead of the center of the sprite like this, I don't know, I kind of liked this. Which is fantastic, because I just saved myself a ton of work by not needing to animate all those turnaround sprites, and I was really happy with the result. So, in my opinion, that first compromise of the turnaround sprites is already taken care of. But I mean, before I could get too excited, the character looking acceptable while the camera moves a little bit is pretty much the bare minimum an art style needs to be able to handle, so I have a few more things to take care of before all my basic needs are met. And I would say one of the most basic needs of a 3D platformer is depth perception. And I mean, okay, depth perception in 3D games has always been hard, but let me tell you, when your characters have literally no depth themselves, it doesn't help. So one of the first things I did was create this fake blob shadow that's always directly underneath the character's feet. And I mean, this is a trick as old as Mario 64, and it really helps ground the character in the 3D space around them. You will feel its absence if you play a 3D platformer without one of these. toss in some code so that the shadow gets smaller the further the character is from the ground, and throw in some particle effects so that when they're running, it sort of illustrates the trail that they've moved on so far and orient you in the direction that you're going. And this 3D platformer is feeling pretty good to me. I mean, modern, fully 3D platformers still use all these tricks, so their effectiveness for me here is really just a testament to how important little details like this can be, and how especially important they are if you're doing something a little unconventional like having flat characters like I am. But with all these tricks, I think the basic needs of my simple 3D platformer are met. And okay, the basics being possible did surprise me, and I am proud of this, but I can already see you commenters pointing this out in the comments below that other indie devs have done this before. I mean, Here Comes Nico, a game that came out last year, does literally everything I've talked about so far. And I mean, there are a lot of indies, for that matter, doing really cool and interesting things with the 2D characters in 3D world space right now, and I definitely want to talk about those. But it seems clear to me that it's going to take going beyond the basics to even be on par with what others are doing in this space right now. And thankfully, with a few modern rendering techniques and Unreal Engine 5, I think I've got a few more tricks left that can impress even the smuggest of commenters out there, so let's bring this prototype into the modern age. But before I start layering on more tricks, it's worth taking a quick moment to step aside and point out that even though this scene here looks basic with just a few characters in a simple scene, it's actually already way more modern than it appears. And this is because high-resolution textures, like all these characters have, is actually way more demanding than you'd probably think. In fact, textures, even with modern hardware and Unreal Engine 5, are one of the most demanding parts of running games even still. And it's especially worth noting that because if I could save any space on the resolution or size of these textures going forward, it could really help me push the boundaries of how many characters I could have on screen or how many animations each of those characters have. So just try to remember that any space I can save on these textures is going to be a really big deal going forward. So anyway, the first real trick that me and a lot of the other indie devs use is something called normal maps. And normal maps, or the reductive version that I'm going to be explaining for this video, are basically a texture that tell the engine how to light a surface. And I mean, okay, some of you may be wondering how this weird purple texture says anything about lighting, and there are a ton of actually good videos out there that'll explain this way better than I will. I'll link them in the description. But most of you probably understand how a typical texture works. I mean, you have a grid of pixels, and each of those pixels contains one color, and put a bunch of those pixels together and you get a pretty picture. But the important thing to understand is that this purple pixel isn't purple, it's 96 red, 42 green, and 116 blue. It can be broken down as just a bunch of numbers. We're just telling the computer, in this case, that the numbers 96, 42, and 116 should add up to that desired color. And okay, I mean, it's probably not surprising that under the hood, colors are numbers, because, you know, computers and code are just numbers, right? So I understand that that part's not surprising, but the part where things get really interesting is understanding that these numbers can mean color, like they do in this case, but these numbers can also communicate anything to the computer using this texture. And I mean anything. Like, seriously, anything. So here, on screen right now, I have a black and white texture where the values of each pixel spell out my real personal phone number in ASCII. Here I have a red and green texture where the value of red in each pixel correlates to a class in Team Fortress 2, and a value of green in that same pixel is the required IQ it takes to play them. Here's a texture where the values of red, green, and blue just spell out Steam keys to Undertale, Dusk, and golf with your friends. Good luck with that one. And so, you know, what if instead of all that stupid stuff, we could have the values of a texture communicate what angle a surface should be lit as? See, because light in games, or the reductive version of light in games that I'm going to be explaining for this video, basically works by taking the angle of a light source and calculating it relative to the angle of a surface. So if a light is at 80 degrees and a surface is fully facing towards it, it'll be rendered as fully lit. And if the light is 80 degrees and a surface is fully away from it, it'll be rendered as fully dark. Everything in between is shaded in between. But what we can do is intercept that calculation with a texture and essentially lie to the light and say, hey, instead of lighting the surface at the angle of the surface, light this surface at the angle that this texture is telling you instead. And that's basically, again, basically, how normal maps work. Normal maps have been used in games for a long time to light flat surfaces as if they had way more depth and complexity to them than they actually do. And this is perfect for me because all of my characters are completely flat. So by adding a normal map to them like this, they can now be lit as if they had real depth and volume to them. And as you can see here, it creates this really nice grim lighting effect to them that not only do I think just looks better, but also really grounds the characters and the environment around them by having them react to the lighting in the environment just like the environment itself does. So not only does this add polish, but it's that little bump of the lamp that really separates the Who Framed Roger Rabbits from the cool worlds. Nobody wants to be a cool world. And so with normal maps, I think that I've brought this prototype into the modern age. I mean, to me this looks at least as good as a lot of the other indies in the 2D character 3D world space right now, and this is awesome. But my commitment to that last compromise, the unrestricted camera, is still causing me one problem. When the camera gets too close, the sprite gets really blurry, like really blurry. And the first instinct to fix this may to just be increase the resolution of the characters, so make them a 4K texture, that way the camera can get pretty close and it won't get blurry for a while, right? But as I elaborated on earlier, making large textures like that is really not ideal. I mean, modern hardware and Unreal Engine 5 are really good, but having a bunch of characters on screen with that many animated 4K textures like that is just not possible in modern times. And even if I wanted to upscale every single character sprite to 4K, eventually the camera's gonna get close enough to them where it will just get blurry regardless, so even if I wanted to upscale to 4K, which again, I couldn't, it doesn't even really solve the problem anyways. And really, zooming in on complicated, multicolored textures like this is always gonna result in blurriness eventually, but thankfully, because of the way I draw my characters, they'll have this cartoony black outline for their line work. So I realized that if I could separate the line work from those colors, render that black line work cleanly, and overlay it back on top of all the blurry colors underneath it, I could effectively have a character sprite that the camera could get infinitely close to because those clean black lines are covering any of the blurriness underneath. And thankfully, distance fields are the perfect trick for this. So distance fields are traditionally used for things like text or HUD elements, things that need to be rendered on screen, sometimes really large, and always need to be rendered very crisp. And they basically, again, basically, work by, instead of the values on this black and white texture being simply what the shape is and what the shape isn't, a fully white pixel is as close to the shape as possible, and a fully black pixel is pretty far from the desired shape. So in this case, the value of the pixels just communicate distance from that shape. So again, white is as close as possible, black is pretty far, and all the shades in between are the distance in between. And through a shader, Unreal Engine can take this distance information and use it to create this beautiful, clean, crisp image that we can zoom in as close as we want to, and it'll never really get blurry. I'm not going to go over the math on how Unreal Engine takes this distance information and somehow uses it to spit out a really clean image. Frankly, I had a friend figure this part out for me, but the bottom line is, because textures are full of numbers and those numbers can be used to communicate anything, in this case distance, we can use that to our advantage to create really cool character work like this. And now we have a hand-drawn 2D character that holds up to scrutiny no matter how close the camera gets. And the coolest part of all this is that normal maps, distance fields, and the simple colors that my characters use all work really well in low resolution. My character sprites can be as small as 128 pixels by 128 pixels across, which is insane. I mean, compare it on screen right now to a normal 128 pixel by 128 pixel character, and you can see the difference that this makes. And again, since textures are such an expensive part of video games still, the savings here are huge. In fact, this sprite size is probably the biggest accomplishment in this video so far. I actually don't know of any other game that uses distance fields in this way to create characters or something like that can be zoomed in really closely to, so the people in the comments, if you know of any, please let me know. I'd actually really appreciate that. And so with all these tricks combined, this art style can handle pretty much anything. And I mean, this is really liberating to me. I feel like I can create any game I want with this, any idea I want with this. Which is great, because boy, do I have ideas. Okay, first idea I have written down, you play as a Ratatouille secret agent, and as a rat, you have this slick 3D platformer moveset that you can use to like stealth around an enemy base, but as soon as you jump on someone's head to control them, it becomes this goofy physics-based disaster. So you're constantly switching between really tight 3D platforming and this goofy physics-based quap fest. It's Hitman meets Octodad. I swear it'd be the hottest game of 2014, and even now, you people aren't ready for it. Okay, next idea I have. You play as this mother raccoon and you need to break into the backyard of this recently built McMansion and steal their food. So again, you have to use this 3D platformer moveset to like find and collect food, and you drop it off at the perimeter of the house to feed your babies. But it works on this like day-night cycle, so you have to replenish your resources and make sure that your family can survive the night. But I mean, you're a raccoon, so the whole time you're just causing all sorts of shenanigans along the way. It's Untitled Goose Game meets Rain World meets Over the Hedge. The next idea I've written down, it's Super Mario Sunshine, but it's depressing. That's actually all I've written down for it. Just the 3D platforming and environmentalist messaging of Super Mario Sunshine, but instead of fighting Bowser, you fight climate change. And lose. So be sure to ring that bell to get notified when that drops. And so, yeah, I mean, if any of those stupid ideas interest you, or you just liked any of what you saw here today, consider, doing the YouTube stuff and liking the video and subscribing to see what's next. A lot of the work here was actually done with the help of an old friend of mine, MorganLaK, and they're actually solo developing a real game right now. It's a first-person platformer inspired by surf maps and Wind Waker. It's called Onder Peak, so give them a follow too while you're at it. I'll be releasing videos as often as I can in 2023, and hopefully have something fun and playable soon too. This is my first video, and I'm sure that shows. I don't really know how to end them yet, so you can check me out at JayTheDevGuy at any of the places. I haven't posted anything, so maybe just go check out MorganLaK instead, and ring that bell if you want depressing Super Mario Sunshine. I will not make it unless you do, so seriously, thanks for watching, and see you next time.